We throw words like trauma and coping around every day, but most of us have no idea what they actually mean. Dr. Natalie Cawley has spent over a decade on the front line of complex trauma, working with kids in care, families in crisis, and adults just trying to survive. She's also the best-selling author of Just About Coping, a book that's been praised by the Sunday Times for its raw honesty and clinical insight. In this episode, Natalie opens up about the myths we get wrong, the realities of survival, and what it takes to really move from coping to living.
My name's Emilia. I'm a third-year psychology student at McMaster University.
And I'm Marley, a fourth-year psychology student at Wilfrid Laurier University.
And welcome to the Enriched Mindset Podcast.
Today we have a special guest all the way from the UK joining us, Dr. Natalie Cawley. We're especially excited to have you here following the release of your book, Just About Coping, which gives an insightful look into your experiences as a psychotherapist and the complexities of mental health. How are you today, Dr. Cawley?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. How are you guys?
Good. Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it. Before we start, we typically like to start off with a few dad jokes. Marley, you can go ahead.
Why don't anxious and avoidant partners play hide and seek?
I don't know why.
Because the anxious one never stops looking and the avoidant one never wants to be found.
Haven't heard that one. That's good.
Okay, I have one more. This one's a bit worse. Why did the disorganized attachment style get into improv comedy?
I don't know.
Because they're unpredictable and thrive on chaos.
Don't we all?
Okay, today we're sitting down with Dr. Natalie Cawley, psychotherapist and counseling psychologist. Her specialization is in attachment theory, a driving force behind why our psychological and emotional functioning informs her therapeutic work, and today she's here to chat with us all about that and more.
Let's get into it.
So what first pulled you into psychology? Was there a moment or a thought, this is it, this is what I want to do?
I've always been a people watcher. And especially like atypical, slightly abnormal behaviours. And then, do you guys have Big Brother over there?
Big Brother?
I think I've heard of that, yeah.
Yeah, it's like where they get people just to live in a house and then they film them 24/7. And then they used to have a psychologist come on and analyse their behaviours and their arguments and stuff, and I always found that really fascinating. And then just atypical things like there's an author called Oliver Sacks, and he wrote a book called The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat.
Yes, I think I'm familiar with that one, yes. Yeah.
And just stories like that of how the brain can, malfunction or play tricks on us, just really fascinated me, and I just wanted to learn more about it. So that was the starting point, really.
What does the path to becoming a psychologist in the UK actually look like? Is it generally pretty structured, or do people take different routes?
I think the idea of it is quite structured. So for me, for instance, I thought I would do my undergrad, do a master's, and then go straight on to the clinical doctorate at the same university, not realising that there's actually a very competitive part in the middle where they want loads of experience, and there's something like a 3% success rate at the moment to get on the clinical doctorate. So people go off and do loads of experience, and then sometimes something else takes their fancy and they find a different area. I almost did psychiatric nursing because of what I did in my experience. So everybody sort of carves out their own route.
Right. Were there any surprises or challenges in the training program that you perhaps didn't expect?
You guys might relate to this, but did you have to do loads of stats?
Yes.
we do.
How did you find it?
Well, I think we're still doing stats, but it's okay so far. It's definitely hard, the coding especially. Yeah.
You're a better person than me. I hated it. And I think us having a broad understanding of stats for like reading research is good, but just employ a statistician or a mathematician if that's... So I thought by the doctorate I wouldn't have to do that anymore, especially doing a counselling doctorate. But it was like 3 hours every Friday of stats.
Wow.
So that
Brutal.
wasn't my favorite, but yeah, brutal. Yeah. Um, and then I guess another surprise was that our sessions with patients would be recorded and then played in front of the whole group, and then everybody would critique it, and I would literally be like shaking, um, just like really exposing. And you're only a trainee, so you do mess up. So that was quite a surprise.
What kept you going, like when it got tough?
Um, I don't know. I think I just definitely knew this is what I wanted to do. And aspects of the course were incredible in terms of learning about myself as well and my own processing. So I knew it was valuable. I just had to get through those brutal bits.
Yeah. Did you ever have a moment where you thought like this is too much or questioned whether it was the right path for you?
Um, yeah, I had quite a brutal stats tutor, and I'd put like a research proposal in, and obviously hadn't done very well. And he sent me like quite an abrupt email saying, but essentially you'll be thrown off the course if you can't do this.
Wow.
But then I was sort of resilient enough to say, this is supposed to be like a caring profession where people have empathy and understanding, and to send me an email like that is not really aligned with the values. So that resonated with them, and then they gave me another shot. But I was quite disheartened by that, to be honest.
Yeah. In Canada, like a lot of students hear that a psychology degree like won't get you anywhere. That's sort of like a stereotype, or that psychology students will be baristas. Is there like a similar stereotype in the UK?
That's such a shame. Um, I think a lot of the people I trained with undergraduate haven't gone on to do psychology related careers. Um, but I think there's loads of transferable skills. Like, it's showing that you're curious and you're interested, and you can do stats and do a science. So I think it's a great broad topic, and you'll find that most people are interested in psychology.
Yeah. What advice would you give to those students who are passionate about psych, but they feel discouraged by these kind of stereotypes?
I think you will find your own route when you do your experience. So like I said, I nearly did psychiatric nursing because I worked in a brain injury forensic psychiatric ward, and I thought that was going to be my place. I've had assistant psychologists that really take to working with kids, and then they go and do education stuff or special educational need things. So stay with it, and you will find the area that you're really passionate about, and then there will be a way into it.
Yeah.
So we actually first came across you on TikTok, where you messaged us while one of our staff was posting a blog promotion about attachment styles. So can you talk a little bit about like what is attachment framework that resonates so deeply with you?
Um, yeah, it started early in my career. I worked for a very, very scary. I know you guys have got a really nice boss, Dr. Lee. I had a really scary one. Wasn't as lucky. But she was like quite an old school psychoanalytic thinker. And so although the job was really scary and there was a lot to do, I learned so much from her. And she used to get me to do things like, we worked in family law a lot, and she used to get me to observe contact between children and parents who were maybe neglectful or abusive, and focus on how the children self-soothed or how they looked for attunement from the parent, how they reacted when the parent left the room or came back into the room. And it just told you so much about what was happening for that child and for that parent and that family. And I've just sort of taken that forward ever since.
Yeah. Given your expertise in attachment theory, do your friends ever come to you for relationship advice?
Um, the book, I say, is very much a do as I say, not as I do. And I did have one review on Amazon where somebody said, like, God, I wouldn't go to her for relationship advice. She's like absolute chaos. So my friends would probably reflect that, but it's all a journey. It's all about learning about yourself and how you respond and cope with things. So now that I'm a bit more regulated, and I think they do still come to me about things.
What do you think like keeps us going back to those relationships who maybe aren't very good for us, like even when the experiences aren't great, like what keeps us going back?
I think they're highly addictive, even on like a physiological level. And it's that intermittent reward of wanting that person to show up for you or praise you or show you love. And that can be quite a roller coaster. And I think we're drawn back. We sometimes confuse it with excitement or passion or lust. And also, the brain will always go for what's familiar. So if that's what you're used to, you're going to keep seeking that out, unfortunately.
Yeah. So obviously our early attachment experiences can have like a huge impact on how we navigate relationships later into adulthood. Are we stuck with those patterns learned early on, or is it possible to unlearn and rewrite them?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely possible. I think the main key to that is self-reflection. And if you can learn to have respect for those survival strategies that were developed because of your upbringing and how you were parented or cared for, with reflection and processing them, you can start to make changes and learn that they helped then, but maybe they're not as helpful now. And you can start, even with behavioral changes initially, to rewire and have different connections.
How do you think trauma shapes our attachment, and what does it take to help young people rebuild trust when it's built or when it's broken so early on in life?
The short answer to that is consistency. So they're very, very mistrusting of adults, of other people generally. They haven't learned like a basic safety in the world and with relationships and being vulnerable, having their needs met. So you have to just keep showing up really consistently, showing that you're holding them in mind. And eventually you can start to be curious about how they can trust you and how they can tell you what they need. But it's a work in progress.
In terms of the therapeutic relationship itself, how do you address and work through attachment related issues that may arise in that aspect?
You have to bring them into the room, and that is sometimes quite nerve-wracking. But being able to say, I think you might be experiencing me right now as your critical father, or you may feel abandoned by me because I'm going on holiday for 2 weeks, and that might be very emotionally painful for you. But actually, is there another way we can look at that and work through it together? And also, you have to be able to take feedback with enthusiasm. So if you've hurt somebody, if you've made a mistake, or you've reflected something inaccurately, you have to be able to take that feedback well and repair with the person so they have like a corrective experience.
For sure. Is there like a common misunderstanding that people have about attachment styles?
I think people are quite well versed on attachment styles now because it's quite popular, but I would say the one thing I keep hearing is trauma bond.
Yes.
And an actual trauma bond is between a perpetrator and somebody suffering. And I think people are mistakenly assuming that a trauma bond is between two people that have experienced trauma together.
Right.
So that's something I've noticed a few times.
Okay, so I guess on the topic of attachment styles, we've prepared a little slideshow for you called Guess the Attachment Style. So I'm just going to share my screen now
Okay, great.
and play that game.
Okay, so how it works is we'll show you one of our team members and some of the behaviors they generally exhibit in a relationship, and you'll guess what their attachment style is.
Okay.
And these are the options that we have. Okay, are you ready?
Yeah.
So we have two team members that overanalyze text and small changes in behavior. They need frequent contact to feel secure and constantly seek reassurance.
So I would call this ambivalent, but I think younger people, modernized, are calling it anxious attachment.
Yes, exactly. Good job. So our next two team members, they trust their partners and do not fear abandonment. They are confident that their relationship can withstand conflict or distance, and they avoid blame and hostility, focusing on resolving the issue rather than winning the argument.
Congratulations to those two because securely attached. Well done.
Our next two team members, they often crave emotional closeness, but also fear getting hurt, rejected, or losing their independence. Their relationships are often emotionally volatile, and they swing from periods of closeness and attachment. They are typically reluctant to open up. They fear judgment or rejection if they show their true selves.
Definitely avoidant. There's some other sort of rejection sensitivity in there as well, but yeah, avoidantly attached.
Yep, exactly. And our last team member places a high value on independence and autonomy, often avoiding emotional dependence on others. She tends to avoid closeness, especially when it requires emotional vulnerability, and she may be hyper focused on protecting her personal space and freedom.
Dismissive avoidant.
Exactly, good job. And then we wanted to add a movie
Wow.
character.
Yep.
So this is the Joker, and he craves connection but panics when intimacy gets real. He starts with overwhelming charm, flattery, and grand gestures, but then this quickly spirals into unpredictability, mood swings, or sudden detachment. And he has a deep fear of betrayal, which is masked by controlling behavior or manipulation.
Ooh, there's a lot to unpack there, isn't there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go with disorganized because it feels like there's quite a lot of features in there.
Yes,
Yes, you
that's
got them
correct.
all right.
Amazing, so glad.
All right, so moving on to your book, Just About Coping. So you've spent years sitting in the therapist's chairs, but writing Just About Coping meant turning the chair around and making yourself the subject. What was that process like?
It was quite therapeutic actually, because
Okay.
I went back through myself in my early 20s, but this time with a lot more compassion rather than just sort of cringing and shame.
Mm-hmm.
It was nerve-wracking because it's extremely vulnerable. It's extremely there's a lot of self-disclosure in there.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I enjoyed it overall.
That's so good.
What made you decide to write the book, and why did you feel it was important to share these personal stories?
Well, my aim was to dismantle shame, and so I thought I better go first and
Mm-hmm.
lead by example and say, I did these things, I was very dysregulated in these ways, but this is how I came through it and found ways to cope. So it doesn't mean you're a failure or you're a mess or, any of those derogatory things people say to themselves about themselves.
Mm-hmm. There's like sort of a stereotype that many psychologists are seen as having perfect lives, like they've got everything figured out, but you've shared your own mental health challenges in the book. Were there any moments that you hesitated to open up about those struggles, especially given the work that you do with your clients?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And not to give away too much of a spoiler, but my mentor and psychologist took her own life, which is in the book. And that was a
Mm-hmm.
big wake up call for me that even though we're psychologically trained and we might know what to do or where to go, it doesn't mean that we're not struggling ourselves. And I just thought it was really important to share that message, really, so that,
Mm-hmm.
we're all fallible, we're all vulnerable.
Mm-hmm. I'm so sorry that that happened, but it's really nice that you decided to talk about that in the book. I haven't gotten to that part yet in the book, but I think that really sets the tone for anyone who's reading it, that mental health professionals like aren't on a pedestal
Yeah,
in that sense, and I think that's something that's really important to point out.
thank you.
Yeah. Were there any moments in writing your book where you thought, I can't share this? And if so, how did you work through that?
Um, there's another story in the book where I broke my neck in an accident, and there was a big relational fallout from that, with my closest school friends. And so I found that I was still quite unresolved in that sort of sense of loss and heartbreak. Um, so I thought really carefully about that, and I really didn't want to come across as like bitter or blaming. So I borrowed a technique from, there's a comedian called James Acaster,
Okay.
and he does a bit in his set about how he tells a story from his agent's perspective, which makes it funny.
Right.
So that's what I did. I just flipped the narrative to try and make it light and humorous, even though it's obviously quite a dark emotional topic. So that was something I wrestled with a lot, but that's how I dealt with it in the end.
How did you decide how much to actually reveal, and were there any parts of the story that you like hesitated to include besides that?
I definitely, everything I put in, I thought, what's the value of this for the reader? Is it gonna help normalize them or help take away some sort of stigma? It's not just in there for the sake of me making fun of myself or, just laying everything bare. So that's how I
Right.
tried to decide.
You talk about coaching clients through anxiety while you're experiencing it yourself. How did you find the strength to hold space for others when you were also dealing with your own struggles?
Um, I think a tip, I guess, for everyone in this field is you have to have a way to regulate yourself in the moment. So I kind of had a way of sort of putting myself in that mode of I have to be the strongest person in this room right now. I can't fall apart. So it will just have to be okay. And then I would be able to regulate myself through the session.
I think there's also a lot of controversy in the field about how much therapists should actually like disclose during a session potentially. So how do you navigate that self-disclosure with your clients?
Yeah, it always has to be in the best interests of the client, which is what I always consider. And there's a story in the book where I use it very effectively, where I have dated a pathological liar.
Okay.
And then one of my clients, who's like a really high flying CEO, like boss woman, is finds out that her partner is a pathological liar and feels a lot of shame that she didn't see this and she didn't realize it. So I used my self disclosure then. And she actually thought it was hilarious because she was like, "You're trained to read people and you didn't pick it up."
Yeah.
But it meant she felt a lot less shame about herself. So it was an effective tool. But I have used it where it's not really enhanced the relationship, and then I've had to think, oh no, that doesn't work for you.
So it just depends on the person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think that experiencing your own mental health struggles while helping others with theirs contributes to feelings of imposter syndrome?
Yeah, 100%. Because you think, who am I to tell this person how to regulate or how to cope if you feel that you're not coping? But I suppose that just brings a bit of humanity to it. Our own self-esteem is always going to go up and down, and our regulation is. But then just falling back on what you know you're an expert in, which is your practice or your modality, rather than that person or their experience.
Is there like anything that you think of in the moment when you're potentially having some imposter syndrome, like a specific sort of takeaway?
I think I never want to lose that feeling because I never want to approach a job or a client with, I know all the answers.
Right.
So I think it's definitely linked to empathy. Like every assistant psychologist, I'm sure you guys are the same, that I've trained, worked with, all experience it. And the stakes are really high when you're working with other people's mental health. So it's good to have that element of, am I doing the right thing? Do I need to read up on this or check with my supervisor?
Okay.
Yeah, I think empathy is obviously very crucial in your work, but can it ever be too much? How do you avoid burnout when you're constantly holding space for other people's emotions?
yeah, compassion fatigue is very real.
Mm-hmm.
It's about learning boundary setting. And, like recently I've been doing couples work, and then one of the couple will email me and say, I needed a session just with you to unpack that. And, I can't be never endingly handing out sessions and being your space for reflecting on reflecting. So you just have to
Mm-hmm.
learn how to very compassionately say, this is your space, but actually this isn't your space, and you can't contact me after 5 o'clock.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you think that empathy is something that can be learned, or are some people just naturally better at it?
I think some people are naturally have more, and that's why they're in these jobs. That's why they're in this profession. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I think potentially you can teach empathy by getting people to perspective take and um, listen. Listening skills are really important. But yeah, I'd say if you're attracted to this field, you've probably got a lot of empathy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Have you ever had a case or experience where your empathy made it hard to maintain professional boundaries?
From working in care, um, I definitely have had cases where I've wanted to take the child home, which obviously can't happen, but just like that pull too, um, which is hard and requires a lot of supervision and a lot of working with the network and the social worker and team around, but that has made it challenging at times.
Mm-hmm. How did you sort of like get over that, or like not want to take them home at the end of the day?
You don't get over it. Um, but you just sort of try and make sure that you've done everything in your power to make them as safe as possible. And
Mm-hmm.
they need you in your role. So you need to show up for them in that way and then have somebody else be the actual carer or parent.
So at Enrich Mindset, we're also really interested in financial psychology and the psychology of money. So we're wondering, like, how do attachment styles play into our relationship with money, and can someone's early attachment experiences affect how they handle their finances?
Yeah, I think attachment comes into everything, all of our processes. So I guess, if you're more disorganized, you might be more impulsive. If you're anxious or ambivalent, you might be more at risk of spending on others or more vulnerable to being taken advantage of. If you're avoidant, you might be more focused on, having a 5-year plan and this is what I'm going to do with my finances for me to protect my future.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think people's mental health improves more when they feel more in control of their finances, or are they often so focused on other mental health challenges that financial concerns sort of take a backseat?
I think being in control of your finances is like having control in any area of your life. So if we can feel in control, we're going to feel more empowered and less dysregulated. I suppose it's if you are in a place where, one bill or one mishap isn't going to bring the whole deck of cards down, that's going to make you feel a bit less vulnerable. Than if you're already overwhelmed and then there's a financial problem as well, that can really push people, over the threshold.
Mm-hmm. For sure. What is your perspective on the relationship between money and happiness?
It's such a big question. There was some research actually about, but I think it's been debunked now, so don't quote me on this. But they did some about people on about £70,000 household income were the happiest. So it was almost
Mm-hmm.
like earning a lot more money wasn't equated with being content or fulfilled.
Right.
So I don't know. I'm not a very money driven person. I don't think most people in this profession are.
Mm-hmm.
But it's definitely, money can obviously bring a lot of anxiety and a lot of difficulties for people.
Mm-hmm. For sure. What is like the average, if you don't mind me asking, like range of salary that someone in your position can expect to make in the UK?
Um, if you're working for the NHS as a clinical psychologist, I'd say it's around 45 to 50,000 a year.
Okay. Mm-hmm. What about like other, like as a therapist, like in private practice or like besides the NHS?
So, private practice, you usually have a fee per client, so it depends how many clients you take on.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I know somebody who charges about £170 a session.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also know somebody who's very good who charges £50 a session.
Okay.
So there's quite a range there. It depends what your expertise is and what you're offering.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's honestly really interesting because in Canada, like, it can be upwards of like $300 a session. So hearing like 50 pounds is kind of crazy. Yeah, there's definitely a really large range, I think, in Canada. Um, but like for assessments and stuff, a lot of people charge around like the 250 to $300 per hour. So
Wow.
hearing 50 pounds is a little bit crazy, but
Yeah. Oh,
yeah.
so it's not really accessible then.
No, not really. A lot of like providers take insurance, I think.
Hmm.
Um, so that's like the one pro of the Canadian healthcare system, like the free healthcare. But yeah, besides that, it is pretty inaccessible,
Wow.
unfortunately.
Hmm.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to someone just starting out in the mental health field, knowing what you know now?
I would say experience is key. So try and get into some job in the field or the sector that you want to be in and just gain as much as experience as you can. Because that's gold dust compared. I mean, academia is good as a foundation, but you really need that lived experience to work out if it's right for you and also learn everything you need to learn.
Do you have any advice on how someone can do that and what types of jobs, like maybe undergraduate psychology students, should be applying for?
Yeah, so over here, like I started as just a care worker, and then tried to find the psychologist in that hospital and went to see them and asked for supervision. I know people that have worked in private psychiatric hospitals in like the admin department, um, or they've like volunteered for charities, mental health charities, just any related avenue is there's always going to be something of interest or something to learn.
Right.
I know in Canada, research is a big aspect in the mental health field, especially if you want to apply to clinical psychology for grad schools. Is that like a similar case in the UK?
Yeah, I think it's an element of what they're looking for. I had done a little bit, not a huge amount, but it also depends on the university that are doing the doctorate because some of them focus more on that than others.
Yeah.
What was like some of the criteria for getting into grad school for you?
Um, well, I did apply for the clinical doctorate several times, but as I said, 3% success rate. It was just ludicrous.
Right.
So I did
Yeah.
the counselling doctorate so that I could work at the same time. And that was just like I had to do an exam, a written exam, a stats exam, and then a panel interview.
Okay.
But it was more, don't want to say easier, but it was more straightforward than the clinical doctorate.
Yeah. Do you have any advice for students doing their undergrad who want to go to grad school? What specifically they should aim to add to their resumes?
Um, I think just a human element, just try and get that in there because everybody's like obsessed with I've done this, done this, done this. But what are you passionate about? What are you really interested in? And what do you want to get out of this for yourself and for other people or the field?
For sure. You talked a little bit about like your mentoring experience. How has that been for you for mentoring students?
Initially, I was very reluctant, and I was very nervous, but I've actually come to enjoy it probably. It's the one of the best parts of my job is training the assistant psychologists and nurturing them, and like developing their skills and skilling them up. I've really enjoyed that.
And what do you think, like maybe compared to like previous generations, some psychology students nowadays may lack?
I think your generation are very attuned. And another thing I think about you guys is that you don't accept anything that's not authentic. You pick up on it straight away and you're like, no. So that's good.
Do you think like that's sort of what the new standard should be like, trying to promote like authenticity and your real self?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me.
Where else can our audience learn more about you and where to purchase your book?
So my book is on Amazon, and my Instagram is Natalie Cawley Psych.
Okay.
Find me on there.
Okay, perfect.
Thanks again so much for taking the time to join us on the Enrich Mindset podcast.
Thank
you for having me. It's been really fun. Thanks.
Thank you so much.